Yahshua took bread, he gave thanks, and he broke it. He gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." I see several things in here that we should do as part of Passover service. Number one, he says, "Eat in haste, with belt around our waist, sandals on our feet, staff in hand, signifying our haste to leave Egypt." And he gave thanks. So before you partake of the unleavened bread, give thanks. Give thanks to Yahweh for Yahshua, whose body was broken for you. Don't slice it ahead of time. Break it after the prayer and then distribute. That's what he did, so that's what we're going to do. Okay? And I guess that was it. All right, so give thanks and break it afterward, and obviously pray a prayer of thanksgiving ahead of time. So this day shall be to you a memorial. You shall keep it as a feast to Yahweh throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. Whoever eats leavened bread from the first day to the 7th day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day there should be a holy convocation. On the 7th day there shall be a holy convocation for you. No manner of work shall be done on them, but that which everyone must eat, that only may be prepared by you. And so we don't do any work on that 17th of what the world calls April, except for food preparations. Food preparations are given as an exception on this day. We are allowed to prepare our food. If there's work involved in preparing that food, it's okay. Otherwise, no manner of work is to be done. So you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on the same day I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as an everlasting ordinance. All right, so we cease from work on the 1st and the 7th days of the feast. Again, this year it'll be what's called April 17th and 23rd, as I understand it. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. Now, this can be a little confusing because he said the 15th day of the month was the day of rest, but here we say 14th day of the month at evening, you eat your unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. And so, we eat no leavened bread during the 7 days of the feast. We got that down. But what about this? Understand Leviticus 23 verse 5 says, on the 14th day of the first month between the evenings is Yahweh's Passover. On the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread to Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. So the 14th day, which is going to be the 16th of next month on the Roman calendar, is Passover day. 15th day is our first day of unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. Do no customary work on it, but you shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh for 7 days. The 7th day shall be a holy convocation. You shall do no customary work on it. So, what's he saying by 14th day at evening, eat unleavened bread? I think if you look at a calendar, here's the world calls April, and here's Passover Day here, and then right here begins the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first day of that feast. But let's convert this over to Yahweh's calendar, and this is the month called Nisan, the first month of the month of the Aviv, which begins on this day here, which corresponds to what's commonly called April 3rd. Okay? But it's basically what I see him saying here is at the 14th day of the month, at evening, when the sun goes down, that's the beginning of the 15th day. So you're sitting in your house, it's the 14th day of the month, sun goes down, or you're coming from the field, the sun's gone down, and all of a sudden, now you're not supposed to eat anything leavened. So I think he's reminding us, they come in for dinner, don't eat any leavened bread that night. Okay? That's what I see him saying. And that corresponds to basically 2 Sabbaths in a row. This is going to be the regular weekly Sabbath here, and this will be, at sundown, will be the following day, will also be the Sabbath as well. All right. 19. 7 days, no leaven shall be found in your houses, since whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Yisrael. Whether he is a stranger or a native of the land, you shall eat nothing leavened. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread. So he's saying here that not only are you to eat no leavening, you're also not to have any in your houses. And not only are you to have nothing in your houses, Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 4 says, no leaven shall be seen among you in all your territory for 7 days. So not even anywhere in your territory, in your area of stewardship. Now, I know some people, they take all their leavened food and they put it in a bag and they set it outside just past the edge of their property boundary, or give it to somebody. Hang on to that for me. And they'll set it out there, and then whenever the week is over, they bring it back. Now, to me, that's a little bit loophole-ish. What I mean is, it's like the Jewish people, some of them will sell their house to a Gentile for $1, and somehow the Gentile always sells it back to him at the end of the week. I'd be keeping it. No, they get their house back after a week, but they get around this requirement to get the leavening out of your house by, well, now it's owned by a Gentile, so I've kept the command. Yes, but you've not really kept the spirit of it. You know, there's supposed to be an exercise here we're supposed to partake of, which is sweep your house, get all the leavening out, everything you can to get the leavening out of your house, right? Nowadays, life is a lot more complex. Most of our food, at least some of us anyway, food comes in boxes. Look at the ingredients, comes in packages and frozen, and it's all pre-made, mass-produced food. It's cheaper that way. Well, a little bit, maybe not, maybe too cheaper, right? Yeah, and then if you sat on the couch, eating your sandwich one day on Shabbat, now you got all the crumbs down inside your couch. So you got to get your vacuum cleaner, and then in your truck or your car, you probably had a sandwich in there too, or something with leavening in it, or cookies or crumbs or something, and so now you got to clean all the junk out of your car. It's with a more complex life that we live today. What did they have to do? Well, it was sweep their house, of course, but add that to our list there. No leavening among your dwelling places or your property. Well, this word translated leaven in the Hebrew, seor, comes from 7604, which means, from sha'ar, to remain, to be left over, be left behind. You got to throw what's left behind? What's he talking about? Well, what they would do, and you can still do it today if you want to, they didn't go down to Walmart and buy little yeast packets, They have a dough, and they take a part of that dough and they set it aside. That's the remnant. Okay? And they'll just let that thing sit there for days, and eventually all kinds of yeast will be attracted to that dough, and it will come in and it will be full of yeast, which, by the way, yeast is a fungus through the air. It's everywhere. And it attaches itself to the dough ball, and it's called sourdough. And actually, this is the way it was done back in the old days. And so that was called the saor, or the dough ball, the remnant. And so all they had to do was take the dough ball and toss it out, burn it, whatever. Kind of interesting, as our lives become more complicated, so it becomes more complicated to get the sin out of our life, right? And whereas a more simplistic lifestyle, it's actually a little simpler. Not so many distractions, not so many going there, going everywhere. Living like the Amish or something, it's a little simpler. Not so much complexity to get the sin out of your life, right? So I think that when we're looking at this topic, there are going to be people who are going to have different levels of interest in getting the sin out or getting the leavening out of the property. But let this be an exercise of the diligence with which you want to get the sin out of your life. This is like a physical something that you do to represent a spiritual truth of getting this sin out of your life, okay? And so, in the same way, you want to do baptism correctly. You want to do other things correctly, right? And so you want to do this correctly as well. It's not supposed to be a legalistic exercise where Yahweh's standing over you with, ready to strike you down over one little breadcrumb in your toaster. Oh yeah, you got to clean your toaster too. Okay, but hey, this is it can be fun. Doesn't have to be a chore. I know for little kids, they're 2 or 3 years old, play a little song, clean up, pick all your toys up. Well, make it a good exercise. It doesn't have to be a chore. Okay, so this word leaven, the thing leavening, actually means to be sour, because the sourdough ball. Okay. Interesting word. Actually, it means in other verb forms, to taste something leavened. It could be something to be embittered, hithpael, to be cruel or oppress or be ruthless. Isn't that interesting? And this is probably why the word sin, this concept of sin and leavening kind of merged together, or morphed together, kind of conflated, meaning similar things spiritually. Like Psalm 71, deliver me, O my Elohim, out of the hand of the wicked, out of the hand of the unrighteous, and the chametz, the leavened man. Right? The leavened man. My heart was leavened, I was vexed in my mind. So, kind of interesting that the word grieved, or what is this? How does this line up with leavening? Well, because sin itself is grievous, because sin itself is cruel, I think that this is how this thing kind of came together as we have it. Okay? So we see Yahshua saying, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, the leaven of Herod, Mark 8:15. So what's the leaven of Herod? He was a Gentile. His was non-religious sin, and then the leaven of the Pharisees was religious sin. Kind of interesting. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, and then there's also hypocrisy, that's a form of religious sin, presenting yourself as a pious individual when really in your heart you're full of all kinds of ugliness. In the case of 1 Corinthians 5, there was a man who had his father's wife, and they were like being all merciful and kind to the guy and treating him like anybody else. And he's saying, wait a minute, he should be cast out. Even that stuff you don't hear among the Gentiles. Step one, our number one thing, he said, four things you got to at least get rid of. Sexual immorality was one of them, right? Acts 15 counsel, get rid of that. Your glorying is not good. Do you not know a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Pretty soon other people are going to think, well, he can get away with it. He can get away with sexual sin. I guess we can look at each other and call each other brothers and sisters and everything will be okay. That's what we see in the church today, sadly. Young men and young women shacking up together, not even married, going to church. Everyone treats them like anybody else as they're living a lifestyle of fornication. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. When Yahshua confronted Jezebel in Revelation and he said, I'm going to kill her children with death, and why do you allow her to commit sexual immorality with those in the congregation? So these things we got to make sure we have cleaned up. Now, today we have more than just yeast as leavening agents. Baking soda, baking powder. In fact, there's a tremendous, ridiculous amount of chemicals that have been used to cause bread to puff up. Isn't that interesting? Sin, is probably, scratch the surface of almost every sin, you're going to find pride there, right? Being puffed up, right? So there's all kinds of things that can cause bread to go poof, not just yeast. So we know ourselves that we don't want any form of leavening in us because he says, let us keep the feast, not with the old leaven, leaven of malice and wickedness, but unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. You ran well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion has not come from him who calls you. Once again, false gospel, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. So what we want to do, I think, is not just dispose of yeast. Things that will be, anything can cause bread to rise, I think, would be a problem. Now, I'm not going to stand over you and say, you got to get rid of all these different... You make your own decision. I've got a list. It's long. And the things that man has come up with to cause bread to rise nowadays, it's incredible. Okay? And they've even found ways, like with a little creativity and some egg whites, so that in your bread, you got pretty good puffy bread there. It's not just about this letter of the law, it's the spirit behind it. If we're trying to find loopholes in this and still enjoy our puffy bread, then you're probably not walking in the spirit of the law, right? So how much do you want to get rid of as far as leavening agents in your home? I've got a list. A brother, he's very diligent, and he sent me this long list. And I thought, wow. And so you look at it and you make your decision what you're going to do with it. And Yahweh will look upon us and hopefully with favor, because really yeast is in the air too. Where does it become a problem? Is it when it touches the bread, and then it's a problem, and then it's something that leavens. If it's not really being used to leaven anything in a particular item, some people think, autolyzed yeast extract is okay. Even though it's yeast, because it's not leavening anything. For me, anything that yeast in, I'm going to get rid of it. That's me. Just because that's the actual thing he says to get rid of. So, but again, this is not about, heaping burdens on people. This should be a joy to us. All of his commandments are not burdensome. They are a blessing for us. They're for our benefit. And so I'm in favor of getting rid of any kind of leavening agents out of your home, and that's what we want to do. How we define that, I'll let you come up with a thought on that. But here's how you make unleavened bread. And I do have it on that page, by the way, on the Passover Seder page on my website, where we're following Scripture right down the line. You'll see a recipe for unleavened bread. Very simple. Wheat flour, olive oil, and water. If you want to add salt, that's up to you. It says all offerings were offered with salt, so you might suggest a little salt on there. But, I'm not saying I've arrived and I have all the answers. I just want to be as close to the truth, as close to righteousness, as close to what is right as we can, because we love him. He gave everything for us. We owe him everything. So you can find a recipe and a full example of Passover service here at eliad.com/passoverservice.html.